Welcome to ZScaler Troubleshooting. Mute your speaker. Sorry about that. Nope, still up. Okay, how about now? Okay, once again, as I said, sorry about that. Nope, still not working. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that. Once again, ZScaler Troubleshooting, your engineers for this session are going to be myself, Gans Guzman, and Diane Dunlap. We're going to go ahead and get started, as I said before. We just heard someone join. If you could just mute the phone on your end, we would appreciate that. Okay, so the agenda for this session is going to be, as I said, ZScaler Troubleshooting. We're going to go over some troubleshooting techniques. We're going to look at ways to diagnose the issue based on the information that users are giving you. We're going to look at some changes you should make in the log before you actually start looking for data. We're going to look at some authentication issues, some SSL issues, and also some browser tools that could help you to diagnose some of these problems. And then we're also going to be looking at, once you've basically done all you can, or even if you choose not to do anything at all, what data should be provided when you engage support. So, as I was saying, a user calls you, they say, the internet's broken. Well, to me, that's not a good assessment, right? Thank you. So as I said, initial assessment, right? So you're going to ask them, are you getting a block page? If you are getting a block page, send me a screenshot of that block page. Is it a security block? Is it a policy block? The block page will tell you a lot. Is the page not loading? I mean, is it broken? Is it just loading funny? Or are they seeing something like a 404 error in the browser, or an internal 500 error or something like that? And as you start to dive in deeper, and this is more based on the information that they've provided, but also the information that you gather, is this just affecting one single user? Could it be a policy that's affecting just a group of users? Could it be affecting all of your users? Could it be a policy on a location? Could it be just a specific browser issue? Or could it just be with a device like an iPad or an Android device or something like that? Is HTTPS involved in this issue? Is authentication involved in this issue? Once again, once we get to the logs, you can see what the logs are telling you, and hopefully that will lead you to the problem. There are some things that you won't be able to determine by way of the logs, and when we get to that point, we'll explain what that looks like. But for now, just know that the logs will generally tell you what the issue is. So here's a block page, standard block page. As you can see, it's an internet access notification page. This is sort of a standard URL block page, right? And as you can see, the reason for this block is the category lingerie and bikini. So let's say this URL, www.fhm.com, is not necessarily lingerie and bikini, right? But as you can see in this policy, which is under policies and URL and cloud application controls, you can see that you are definitely blocking that lingerie and bikini category. Now let's say, as I said before, this is a mistake, right? You didn't mean to block that category, so you can unblock it at this point, save this policy, and be done with it. But if this actually is something that you want to block, the better approach would be to create a custom category and then add that URL to that custom category. By adding that URL to that custom category, you effectively remove it from the ZScaler defined category. So this URL will no longer be categorized as lingerie and bikini. So as I said, when you see the issue being a URL block, you can either go and see whether or not you're actually blocking that category and unblock that category, or decide I do not want to unblock that whole category and actually create a custom policy or a custom category to just unblock that URL. Now, something I also like to bring up when it comes to URL blocks is there are actually two types of URL blocks. And what I mean by that is if you're doing SSL inspection, meaning at the location, then a URL block is a URL block. But if you're not doing SSL inspection, you have this concept of the default SSL block, which you can see here. This is the default SSL block. When you actually look at that block message, you will see HTTPS instead of HTTP. And that will lead you to it being blocked by the default SSL block. But once again, this is ignored when you're doing SSL inspection. But if you're not doing SSL inspection, this is definitely the source of that block. So let's take a look at another block message. So this is a different block message. As you can see, it's a security notification block, right? And the reason for block is not allowed to access sites in Korea. It's probably a good block. I don't know. It all depends on your policy. So let's see where this block is actually being enacted. So we go to policies and we go to advanced threat protection. And halfway down that page, you'll see the suspicious destination protection. So you're allowed to actually block content based on where it originates from. Once again, kind of a handy feature if you feel that Russia is generating a lot of content that is undesirable, you can go ahead and just block the whole country. Now, that doesn't stop Russia from hosting their servers in China or in the US for that matter. But just know that this will probably block about 90% of that traffic, right? So here's another block message. Once again, also a security notice, but you can see that the category is actually virus, right? Now let's say that, let's look and see where this is actually being initiated at, right? So you go under policies, you go under malware protection, and you can see here that we are definitely blocking viruses. You don't ever want to turn this off. You want to leave this on to block viruses. Let's say that URL was not, or you think it may not be a valid assessment, right? You think it's a false positive. So instead of allowing viruses, it's better to just go ahead and create a security exception. And the way you do that is on the security exception tab. And you would just add that URL to the exceptions list. Once again, as I was saying, do not allow bad stuff, right? Always leave those toggles on to allow those scans to actually happen, and then just bypass the security checks for that single URL. But just know that when you create this type of security exception, you actually exempt all the security checks. So, I mean, whether it was a virus or not, they could still be serving phishing off that site. They could still be doing some botnet stuff. It doesn't matter. Just know that when you bypass the security checks, you bypass all of the security checks. So just know that before you actually put in an exception here, make sure that it's something that you want to do. And if it's something that you need to do, in the case of we had an issue back, now it's probably been maybe 6 months, 8 months, with Bank of America. Bank of America was serving phishing off their site. ZScaler was blocking them. People needed to get to Bank of America. So my recommendation was go ahead and put in a security exception, do what you need to do, and then take it out. And hopefully Bank of America will take care of business and clean that up. But you would know that if it happened again, you would just do the same thing again, right? It's kind of a cat and mouse thing, but sometimes it's probably the better approach to take than to just allow it to just continue to allow this malicious traffic inside your network. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. As you can see, this one is a little bit different, right? You can see that it's a social networking blogging notification. And if you look at the reason, or I'm sorry, I take that back. I highlighted the wrong one. If you actually look where it says per company policy has been denied, the application is Facebook. So let's say you want to allow Facebook, right? So this was an unintentional block. We go and we look at the policies, and we can see that there's a policy here that is indeed blocking the application Facebook. Once again, if this wasn't a desired effect, maybe the better thing to do, instead of allowing it for everyone, is if it was something that you were trying to block for some but allow for others, Being that it is a Web 2.0 policy or a cloud application control policy, you could actually make this more granular and say allow it for this group, say teachers, but continue to block it for students, right? Or just remove the block altogether. But just know that any type of cloud application control will always tell you the actual super category, as in the case of this one was the social networking and blogging notification. So it makes it really easy to determine that this is definitely a cloud application control block and where you would find that block, all right? So we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at yet another block message. This one, once again, is an internet access notification block. So you would think URL, but when you actually look at the reason for this block, it was not allowed to access this file type. And as you can see in that URL string, there is a test.exe file in there. So where this block is actually set is actually under policies, access controls, and then file control types. This was actually placed here in the last iteration of the update of the UI. This is still a security check, but because of where they moved it, they're sort of treating it like a URL policy, but it really isn't a URL policy because it's still a security check. It's actually looking for file types. And once again, as you can see in this particular policy, you are definitely blocking EXEs. So once again, if this is not a desired effect, modify this policy either to allow it for a certain group of users or allow it for everyone. So as I was saying, when you look at the logs, right, by default, not all the fields are enabled when you go to the log. And when you go to logs, you go under analytics and then web insight. Make sure that before you actually start configuring anything, that you click that log bar. Otherwise, any filters that you create will get removed when you do click that log bar. So you click on the log bar, you set your filters, and you hit, apply now. It comes up. As soon as it comes up, click on these little hash marks over here in the right-hand top corner there, and select all. This will enable all of the fields or all of the columns in the logs. Why that is beneficial? Because there's a lot of information that's available in the logs that you will not see unless you enable all those fields. Okay. So as I said, try to use filters when you're looking for stuff in the logs. If you're looking for a block message, use a web action to block. If you're looking for content for a specific user, use a filter for that specific user. Now, where that will not work for you is when the traffic is unauthenticated. And even when you're doing authentication, your authentication bypasses will still be in effect. So anything that is off bypass will not show up for that user. So you may have to do this query a couple times. You may have to do it once for the user and see whether or not there's actually transactions for that user, and then you're going to have to do it once for the URL just to make sure that you didn't miss anything. And what I usually like to do is when I do those queries, as soon as that query comes up, is I like to go ahead and export that to a CSV. And the reason why is it's a lot easier to look at this data or slice and dice this data in Excel than sometimes it is to actually do this in the logs when you're actually working with a large data set. So just know that sometimes it is best to go ahead and export that data before you actually look at it. Unless, once again, unless it's just a few pages, sometimes there could be quite a bit of data in here. So just know that exporting your logs can sometimes be a benefit to you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Diane, and she's going to talk about authentication and SSL issues.
Okay, hi folks. We came up with sort of a flow chart here because a lot of times when you have problems with Zscaler, you don't get those nice user-friendly messages that tell you where to look in the Zscaler interface to figure out what the problem is. So what we suggest doing if it's a mysterious problem is trying to test going to the website from, say, a 3G connection or outside the school. Just run over to Starbucks and see if you have a problem there. Okay? See if it fails there. If it does, then it's not a Zscaler problem. Sometimes websites are just down. Okay? If it doesn't fail from there, then yes, it may be a Zscaler problem or it might be a firewall problem. I know a lot of folks already have some exclusions from Zscaler filtering based on static PAT addresses set up in their firewall. Say a PC at someone's desk, or say the Active Directory box. Some of those boxes at your site may already be source excluded from Zscaler filtering. If that's the case, try to go to the website from that site to see if there's a problem. If you can't get to the website from there, but you can get to the website from Starbucks or 3G, the problem can be the firewall. Okay? If so the firewall we're going to look at in a little bit. But then we want to look at, if you're having a problem generally, could it be an SSL or authentication problem? In your administration UI, where you have your locations, you can look to see if you have SSL filtering, SSL decryption, and they call it, or authentication on for the site. A lot of times people will have authentication and SSL filtering on for certain locations, but not for others, say the guest network. So what happens if you move to the guest network and try to get to the website? Where, when guest, you don't have authentication or SSL on, do things look okay? Or wait until after school, remove authentication, test again, remove SSL, test again. And depending on which is interfering with the process, add your website to authentication bypass or SSL bypass, which we'll look at in a little bit, okay? If neither of those works, we'll be talking a little bit about collecting debugging information to open an MCNC ticket, okay? All right, so we talked about how you could have a firewall problem where your traffic is going out on a non-standard port. That would be a firewall problem because Zscaler only filters on port 80 and 443. And sometimes it's fairly straightforward. In this example, where we're going to a website and it has :8080, that's a non-standard port. So if you're having a problem getting to this particular site, this would be a firewall problem, not a Zscaler problem. And if you manage your own firewall, you can just open the port. If it's an ITS managed firewall, you can open a ticket with MCNC and we'll get that taken care of. Okay. All right, but suppose it's not a firewall problem. Suppose it's an authentication problem, and you would know this because you went to a site within your school where you weren't doing authentication or you temporarily removed authentication. In this case, you would go under Administration, Advanced Settings, and make sure that your website was in a bypassed category. This is, again, a custom list. In this case, we used our custom list. It's called Google, but yours might be called Good Sites, Whitelist, whatever. And your website to be excluded from authentication would be on this list. And this is where we add our bypass. Okay. Another example is if we've determined that a site needed to be excluded from secure socket layer decryption. In this case, we are excluding Google and Twitter from SSL filtering because the SSL, the Zscaler certificates, are interfering with rendering the web page. Okay. And as part of the authentication discussion, we kind of threw this in. Some folks are doing authentication to Active Directory and some are not. Once in a while we will get calls from folks who are saying, none of my users can authenticate, we're down. Well, obviously the first thing to do would be to go into your interface and just disable authentication so that the teachers could do their thing and the students could continue learning while we work on the problem. But if you go into Administration and Authentication Setup, you can see when the last time the synchronization happened. The synchronization happens daily. It's a default setting. And if you've maybe done some work on your Active Directory box over the weekend and you see that the last time there's a successful synchronization was on Friday, then you know that maybe something got messed up in Active Directory over the weekend. Okay? Once in a while we'll have an issue where the password's expired for the Zscaler account. That would be a problem. Or if the account got completely deleted from Active Directory, that could also be a problem. You can also go in and that button right beneath there, it says Sync Now. Once you fix the problem, if you do Sync Now, it should go ahead and pull in your users again. Okay. If you go into Administration Authentication Setup Wizard, there are a couple screens in here that are useful for testing for individual users. And this is the look up user entry just to see if it found the user in Active Directory. You can enter the user manually right here. Okay. Or you can check the user's password. So, you know, if you've got Jimmy Smith says he took his iPad or his laptop home last night and he couldn't do his homework because he couldn't authenticate. Here's how you can go in and check Jimmy Smith's password in ZScaler to see if it works or not. Enter his username and password to see if it's a Jimmy Smith problem or if it's a more general problem. Okay, and here we have some device level tools to see where the device is actually going, because we talked about having to exclude sites from authentication and SSL. A lot of times it's difficult to see where a web browser is actually going. And these are some embedded tools in a web browser that you can use to determine where the web browser is actually going. This one is Firefox, and in Firefox, if you go into Developer Tools and Network, this will give you a listing of all the sites that the web browser is visiting. And in our example, we went to CNN. And when you go to CNN, it's actually hitting just gobs and gobs of sites under the covers.
Right. Okay. If you go to something like PowerSchool, you'll see powerschool.com/content. And that's pretty much the only domain
Pretty basic,
you'll see.
yeah. Okay. So that was Firefox we just looked at. Chrome, if you go into Chrome, More Tools, Developer Tools, Network, this would show you where you're going in Chrome. It's again CNN. Okay, and Microsoft Internet Explorer. If you do F12 Developer Network, this shows where Microsoft Internet Explorer takes you. Okay, and
then once you have those URLs, right, you can go ahead and see how they're categorized by using the URL lookup tool, and that's found under Help and then URL lookup. So before you create your bypasses, make sure that first you're blocking this stuff, right? Because there's no sense in creating a bypass for something you're not blocking, right? And then if you are in fact blocking that URL based on its content categorization and you don't want to allow that category, then you can go ahead and start putting those URLs in a custom category and building your custom category list. Okay?
Okay. We're also going to show Fiddler, because folks ask us, well, like, I've got an iPad. How do we figure out where the darn iPad is going? And iPads do tend to be rather mysterious. Okay, we've got this kind of neat tool called Fiddler, and it's free. You just go out to the Telerik website, and okay. And Fiddler listens on port 8888. If you're using Fiddler, you may need to take the Fiddler certificate and load it on the iPad. Just like with ZScaler, you might have to take the ZScaler certificate and load it on the iPad, especially if you're going to the SSL sites. In the PC that you've got Fiddler running on, you would disable the Microsoft firewall.
Or create a policy that allows port 8888 from the outside in.
Okay, and then within your wireless settings, if you go to the SSID, down towards the bottom, you've got your automatic, manual, or off for proxy, and you would put the IP address of the PC that has Fiddler in there, and then port 8888 in there. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And what we're going to do is look at Fiddler, and I'm going. You actually can't see the iPad here, but I'm going to be bringing out various apps in the iPad and cruising around. Yeah, okay, so I just went to Flipboard here and Anthro, and you can see how it's going to a bunch of different places. So you're actually able to see where the iPad is going, even though it's kind of hard to troubleshoot an iPad.
Right.
Okay?
I mean, you could do this same thing on the firewall, like capturing the packets or on a switch, but this kind of makes it a little bit easier. Because now you don't have to look at gobs and gobs of traffic. You can look at just that one device that you're proxying through your machine that you've got Fiddler running on. So it makes it a little bit easier to be able to pick out this traffic pretty quickly.
Sort it out of the and it's disaster alert. We're going to go to that one. Yeah. And it is still as many, if you've got gobs of iPad apps, especially if you're doing the push notifications and having tied in Facebook and Google and all, it might be a little difficult to sort out what's what on the iPad, but it's a little more user-friendly than using the firewall to troubleshoot. Okay, and I think the next one, yeah, okay, and this actually shows where the settings are in the iPad to point the iPad to Fiddler.
Okay, so we went over some basic troubleshooting techniques and some more advanced troubleshooting techniques, I guess, by using Fiddler as a proxy. We looked at the different tools that are available to you in the browser to be able to try to discern the traffic so that you can go ahead and create the policies you need. We looked at some authentication issues or at least how to actually begin to troubleshoot authentication and SSL issues. So now you've gotten to the point where you're done. You just don't want to troubleshoot anymore, and you just want to turn this over to somebody else. We're more than happy to help you troubleshoot these issues, but we need you to help us, right? We need some information from you. So let's look at what that information would look like. So there's a tool that's a plugin, it's an add-in for Firefox. It's called Live HTTP Headers. This is actually a really nice tool because it allows you to actually capture these headers, and as you can see, I'm in Firefox. I went ahead and I went into my menu, and I've got my live headers there, and I went ahead and clicked it. And you want to do this before you start launching web pages. So you just want the default web page. And when you do that, you'll get this window that'll come up. And as you can see, it's in capture mode. So it's going to start capturing traffic as soon as you type a URL into the browser. So I go here, I type a URL into the browser, and as you can see, I did CNN again. CNN there's just so much traffic that goes on when you hit CNN. It's amazing to even think that there's that much content on a single web page, but there is. And then once you're done actually capturing the traffic, all you got to do is hit Save All, and save it as a text file, and then send that text file along with your request to support at mcnc.org, and that gives us something to work with. Makes it a little bit easier on us because we may be able to resolve this for you quickly while we're on the phone without having to say, okay, give us 20, 30, 40 minutes so that we can try to replicate this issue, and we may not even be able to replicate it, right? Because it may only be in your environment and we may not be able to replicate it. So then we have to go back to you again and ask for more information. So having this stuff readily available really does move the process along. Also, you can capture traffic using Wireshark, and Diane's going to talk about how you actually, where you want to actually sample this traffic from and so on.
Okay, so if you're going to use a packet capture, you need to get the packet capture to begin with, and Wireshark is excellent. It's free. This is the website where you can get Wireshark, and whether you're using it to capture ZScaler traffic or to troubleshoot something in your network, like a DNS problem, DHCP, whatever, you really need to have Wireshark on a machine. Okay? All right, so as Gons mentioned, there's several different places that we could use or could capture traffic from. Okay? We could capture traffic from the device itself. And that would be, where we're showing A in our diagram is our wired device, or B at the switch that the wired device is on. Okay? For that matter, live headers, if you're capturing on the device itself, live headers would probably be sufficient, but you can run Wireshark in conjunction with your web browser just to see what's up.
Right, okay? and the nice thing about doing that as well is it actually does turn out to be a firewall issue. We'll be able to tell by your packet capture because we'll see connections to ports other than 80 and 443, right? And that would give us an indication that it's possibly a firewall issue.
Okay, so with Wireshark, we have to tell it what wired connection we're going to be doing the capture from. Okay, and
always a wired connection. Don't do this over wireless.
Yeah, we need special drivers, special cards, and so on for wireless stuff. Okay, so basically, yeah. Okay, so so if we're capturing directly on the machine, all you have to do is specify the interface and then say start. But if we're going to capture the traffic at the switch, Okay, we have the commands used. Let's go back one. Okay, the commands used for a Cisco switch and an HP switch, and this would be useful if you had a wireless device, say an iPad or whatever, going through an access point and hitting the switch. And in our example, we would plug our laptop into port 01, I'm sorry, 010 in our example, and our access point or our wired device that we're having a problem with is on port 01. So this is called mirroring or span port or monitor port, depending on the vendor. And there's pretty good size write-up on the Cisco website of how to set this up. But in our example, we're saying our source interface is Fast Ethernet 01, our destination interface is Fast Ethernet 010, and any traffic going through Ethernet 01 will be seen on Ethernet 010.
And just from you know, good practices, right? Whenever I'm getting ready to configure a monitor port, before I configure anything, I'll always do a show monitor first to see whether or not there even is a monitor port already created, right? If there's a monitor port already created, you may be able to just reuse that one, right? Or if there isn't one, then at least you're free to use session 1, right? If there's one already created on session 1, you're going to want to create a session 2,
yeah,
right?
So
always good practice to go ahead and do a show monitor first, just to make sure that there are not any monitor ports configured.
Okay. All right. And in this case, it's just the syntax for an HP switch is what we're trying to get at here. The little bit different, they call it a port mirror. Again, your port mirror, your destination is A10 and your source is A1. So a little different syntax on an HP switch. All right, so our last option is to capture traffic on the firewall. So if we don't have access to the switch, but we do have access to the firewall, or maybe our device is just directly behind the firewall, maybe in a firewall port, or our switch maybe doesn't support monitoring. There's actually a YouTube video devoted to how to get a sniffer trace on the ASA firewall. And I think most folks do have the state-supplied firewall. If you have your own firewall, you know, and it's not an ASA, it's bound to be a little different, the syntax. If you have the ITS managed firewall, they will give you read-write access to your own firewall. So you can just open a ticket with us. We will get ITS to set you up with read-write access, or read access, probably read-only access to your firewall. And this YouTube video shows you how to go in and get a sniffer trace on the firewall. Okay. We have a few folks that have Sonic Wall. There's also a YouTube video devoted to how to get a sniffer trace in the Sonic Wall.
And we do recommend that if you actually do have these, we will make these slides available for you, so you don't have to try to write down these URLs. You know, you'll be able to copy them later. But if you don't know how to do a packet capture on your firewall, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and just review these videos and figure it out, right? Because at some point you're probably going to need to.
Okay. And we're going to show an example of a packet capture taken to troubleshoot an actual problem we have here. And this is a problem where a school reported a problem.
You want to bring it up?
Yeah. Okay. This is where a school reported a problem with Google Hangout and told us, yeah, Google Hangout stopped working. And we said, well, did anything change? No, nothing changed. And so we tried to reproduce it in the lab, because my first thought was, well, it sounds like a Google problem. I mean, because no other schools had reported the problem. So we went ahead and got a sniffer trace in the lab, because I did see the same problem in the lab. And at that point, I thought, well, gosh, that's strange. So I wanted to see if it was a firewall problem. And so we added a filter to our Google Hangout sniffer trace to determine
and if you look at this, right, there is a lot of data here, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of stuff here. So using your filters in Wireshark is definitely a good way to get to the data that you want. So as you can see, there's a string that we've crafted up there that should hopefully provide us the data that we're looking for. Ignore the fact that it's yellow. It's because of all the syntax that's in there. Wireshark is saying this may not work, but trust me, it did, because we applied it And sure enough, there it is.
Okay, and so what our filter did was exclude all traffic in 80 and 443. So if it was a Zscaler problem, you know, 80 and 443 would be, you know, a Zscaler problem, but we found a bunch of traffic was not 80 and 443. And as you can see, a bunch of this is UDP traffic to port 19302 in there, okay? And I realized then, well, we've got an outbound list on our firewall in the lab that was blocking port 19302.
Well, technically it was blocking everything that wasn't the allowed ports.
That's true, yeah. So, but 19302 wasn't allowed. I dropped the access list and then everything worked on our Google Hangouts. So I contacted the LA and said, any chance you're blocking 19302 on the self-managed firewall? And they're like, yeah, we are, you know. So they started allowing that port, and then their Google Hangout traffic came back. So this is an example of why getting a sniffer trace is useful, and this one we got on the firewall.
And you know, as we were saying, crafting these we could have probably done this with a capture filter, but sometimes when you're looking for traffic or you're looking for problems, using a capture filter will cause you to miss the problem, right? So that's the reason why you have to capture so much traffic and then use the actual display filters after the fact, so that you can go ahead and whittle your way down to the actual problem. Okay. So as we were saying, information that you need to provide, the header information, the header information, a packet capture would be nice. IP.zscaler.com. This is like the easiest piece of information for you to get, and I can tell you how many times people don't provide this, and we have to ask them for it over and over again. And this actually has to be produced by the user that is having the issue. And the reason why that is because of the way we do locations in Zscaler, right? And those locations could go to various different nodes, and it could be a node-specific problem. But without this IP.zscaler.com output, we won't know what node you're going to. So definitely, this is one piece of information that should always be provided. And it's easy to do, especially because you already have the user on the phone. They're reporting the problem. Have them go ahead and just quickly launch the browser, type in this URL, get a screen capture, and email it to you. Okay? And as you can see, there is also other useful information on here, because you can see who the user is logged on as, right? Let's say that's not their name, right? It's a teacher, and for some reason, they're logged on as a student. That would be a really good indicator as to why they're having a problem, right? Because that particular website may not be allowed for a student. So, and this is an easy one to fix. All you do is just log out, you refresh your page that you were going to, it'll prompt you for authentication, you log back in, and everything's working. Now, of course, you've got another problem. Why was that machine still logged in as a user? But, once again, that's a problem that you can solve. You don't really need to contact us for that one, okay? So, like I said, ip.zscaler.com. Useful information, really easy to get, and we need it. So, screenshots. I can tell you how many times we ask people for a screenshot of the errors, and to me, this is, once again, easy information to get, right? And the user that is reporting the problem should be able to provide this to you. Or you can reproduce the problem yourself if you can, and then provide the screenshots, right? So don't be afraid to provide screenshots. Provide all of them. We want to see them all, because the truth is, the more information we have, the quicker time to resolution. And here's another error that we've been seeing, quite a bit in the last few weeks, because people forgot to update their Zscaler certificates, and they were doing SSL inspection. And this is the error that everyone was getting in Chrome, right? This isn't the same error you would see in Firefox, but this is the error you were seeing in Chrome. You could see that error, cert invalid, and it was because the new Zscaler certificate was not applied. So, like I said, these screenshots of these errors will help us to fix the problem as quickly as possible. And any other errors you might be getting, right? Whether it's a 404 error, a 403 error. I will tell you that a 403 error and a 404 error could be a Zscaler problem. It really could be. But if we see that you're getting that error, and we go and we we log into that site and we get the exact same error outside of Zscaler, we know that it's not a Zscaler problem. It's a problem with that website, and we can do that pretty quickly while we have you on the phone. Let's see. So, as I said, gather this information, put it all together in an email, and then email it to us, right? So, we always get asked, you know, how do we get support for Zscaler, right? Well, there are two ways to get support. You can either send an email to support@mcnc.org, or you call us at 919-248-4111. Someone is going to pick up that phone. That phone rings on many desks. Someone's going to answer that phone, okay? If, for some reason, you feel like you're not getting the attention to the problem that you deserve, and I'm being serious about this, if you feel that you're not being provided the support that you need, contact their boss, okay? He is more than happy to resolve that issue. But let's say, you know, he's asleep on the job. You know, he didn't get any sleep last night, and he's sleeping at his desk, and he's not answering his phone, he's not answering his email. Contact his boss. And trust me, if it gets to that level, things are going to happen. We have not had that happen yet, but I can tell you that, you know, when it gets to that level, it gets a lot of attention, and things start moving. But always start at the bottom, right? Start with the help desk, open your ticket, provide the information they need to resolve the problem, and you know, and hopefully they'll be able to give you an idea. You know, okay, we're gonna have to open a ticket with Zscaler. If we have to open up a ticket with Zscaler, then that adds to that time to resolution, right? Because we gotta coordinate with them, we gotta provide them the information, we gotta go over the problem again. You know, so it does add some more time there. So definitely be patient, but don't be like 2 weeks to a month patient. I mean, really, if there is a problem that's dragging on that long and we haven't told you that problem is a bug, then there is a problem. And you really need to go ahead and start using those escalations to get resolution. And once again, further up the stack, the man at the top, you know, if you got to go all the way to him, then we really have a serious problem. Okay, so that's pretty much all the content that we have.
Okay.
So we want to open the floor up for questions, and we prefer that you use the chat only because if everyone starts talking at the same time, it's gonna create a mess, and we're not gonna be able to hear you.
Okay, now we do have a question about getting an error message on some internal sites, even with the new certificates. If it's an internal site, I'm guessing it might be something like if one goes to Hive Manager or the Cisco controller internally, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would bypass. I would definitely, if you're seeing that kind of stuff, you shouldn't really be seeing it because it should never be getting to Zscaler. But in the case of Hive Manager, where it's a cloud service, it's not always internal, right? That could be the reason why it looks kind of weird. Bypass this stuff, right?
Well, but if it's internal, okay, I think what's going on with Hive Manager and some of those sites, they're doing SSL, but with a self-signed cert. Okay. I think is what's going on, okay? In your PC, if you do certmgr.msc from the command line, and Gon's going to show us here, he's more of a PC person.
So you want to do
yeah, certmgr, okay.
certmgr?
CERT, okay. certmgr.msc, okay? If we do this command, it shows all the certs that are available, I think. Okay.
It's still working.
It's still working. Okay, I was thinking about it. All right.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So here are the trusted roots available. Okay. If you can see there's a list of your trusted root certificates there. And if you go into your trusted root certification authorities, you probably don't have one in there for, say, Hive Manager. I'm just picking on Hive Manager, but any kind of a web server you have internal to the school. If you don't have a trusted root cert, that's why you're getting the error message. Okay, if you have a Zscaler offsite laptop, if you go down to the Z's, you do have a Zscaler.
I may not,
root.
but
Gons may not. Okay,
but we'll go ahead and we'll look real quick and see if it is there.
Okay. But if you have the ability to get the self-signed cert off of the device, the Hive Manager, the Cisco controller, the Apache web server, whatever you've got internally, if you have the ability to get the self-signed cert off there, you can go into Action Import here and import the cert into your browser. And after you import it, you shouldn't get that error message anymore. But in that case, it sounds like it's not a Zscaler problem because you're not really going out in the GRE tunnel because it's internal to the school.
And as far as the slides, these will be made available. So definitely after we go ahead and we look at the video and make sure everything's good, we'll post the video of this session because we did record it, and we will also post these slides. The slides will more like, well, it all end up in the K-12 landing page, but the video will actually be from Adobe Connect, but we'll put the link to it on the K-12 landing page.
Okay, now we have another question about Chromebooks, okay? It says they won't update Chrome OS while in the district. We do have a list on the MCNC website of sites that need to be excluded for Chromebooks to work well, okay? And
so it could be a custom category issue.
It could be a custom category. The only other problem we know with Chromebooks is when they have the batteries gone down and the NTP is off. The time is off.
When the time sync is off, that will create issues with updating.
Right. And the issue, or the way you should take care of that, is to put them on a site or a sublocation where authentication is off and SSL is off. Wait until they get their time synchronized, and then you should be able to put them back on the SSL and authentication sublocation. We do have a ticket open with Google on that, okay, because Zscaler's looked at it, and the deal is they're going to Google is the problem as part of the NTP process. Yes, you can exclude Google. If you exclude Google, then Safe Search doesn't work.
Right. Yes, you definitely do not want to exclude Google if you can help it, because it will break Safe Search. But you could do the Safe Search DNS redirect, which would in fact work even if you do exclude Google. But we try not to do the Google exclusion if we can help it. There have definitely been some issues in the past where we had to actually use the redirect because Google was doing some weird things, and that was the only way to truly enforce Safe Search. So that was something that we were recommending, and we still recommend that you do it. I know that Google has also implemented a redirect for YouTube, force safe something. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like force safe
Force
YouTube
safety mode or something like
yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
So that is also another one that we're also recommending, as far as the DNS redirect on the inside to be able to go ahead and make sure that you can enforce Safe Search in YouTube as well.
Now, one of our other folks does suggest to make sure that the new cert is in the Chromebook management console. Zscaler put out new certs about a month ago, I think. Oh, actually,
they've been out for a while, but they actually made the switch probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Right. So you need to check and make sure that the new cert is in the Google management console.
Right, because that could be a reason why your Chromebooks aren't working as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
Okay. Well, I think the slides will probably, the webinar will be posted within a week.
Yes.
Probably, yes.
All this information should be, actually the slides should probably be posted, could be posted by the end of the day today. I have to get it to our knowledge group to go ahead and have that done. But the video, like I said, we may want to edit it a little bit, so that probably won't be until later, but definitely the slides will go up as soon as possible. But all this information, like I said, will be available in the K-12 landing page. And we also have plans to do more of these webinars. So suggested topics would be helpful. So if there are any areas that you would want a deeper dive in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Zscaler. If it's something that we can do in an hour, we will do our best to go ahead and present some information that would be useful to you. So you can feel free to go ahead and drop those suggestions to us either via email or whenever you're talking to us, you can go ahead and provide those suggestions. But if we don't have any more questions, that's pretty much all the content we had. So we're going to go ahead and sign off.
Thank you for coming.
Yep.